Hello and welcome to another episode of Bell Financial Group's From the Helm series. I'm Grady Wulff, Senior Market Analyst with Bell Financial Group. Cynata Therapeutics, ASX CYP, is an Australian clinical stage stem cell and regenerative medicine company, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the company's CEO, Kilian Kelly. Kilian, thanks for joining me today to discuss the company's outlook and what you've been up to.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Now, for those new to the Cynata story and Cynata Therapeutics, can you please give us a simple overview of what the company does?
Sure. So Cynata is a biotech company based in Melbourne. We are entirely focused on developing stem cell and regenerative medicine therapies. So that basically means making advanced therapies for a range of serious medical disorders, which currently have either no treatment or no effective treatment. And we have a unique manufacturing process, which allows us to make these therapies very consistently and at scale.
Now, mesenchymal stromal cells, or MSCs, are at the center of your technology. What exactly are they and why are they so important?
So MSCs are cells that actually exist naturally in the body. So we all have these cells, but in very small numbers. Now, the reason they're of interest is they have very powerful effects in terms of balancing the immune system, and they also promote tissue repair and regeneration. Now, as many people will know, the immune system plays a role in lots of different disease processes. So being able to control the immune system can have a lot of benefits. Furthermore, of course, lots of disease processes cause damage to tissue. So being able to help regenerate tissue, needless to say, can help resolve those issues. Now, as I said, these cells exist naturally in the body, but in very small numbers. So what we're doing is producing larger numbers of these cells that are then administered by injection, for example, just like you would with a drug treatment in order to actually treat diseases.
What has been the biggest challenge with MSC therapies to date, and how does Cynata's platform overcome that?
Yeah, the biggest challenge in this field, which has really been active for more than 20 years now, the biggest challenge has been how we can actually make these cells at large scale and consistently. So because these cells exist naturally, conventional manufacturing methods, so in other words, the way everybody else makes these products, is that they get donations, for example, bone marrow donations, and then they have to isolate the MSCs from those donations and then basically grow these cells in a lab. Now, that's very difficult to do in a consistent way at large scale. And that has really caused a lot of problems in terms of bringing these therapies to market. And that's really where we come in. We have a unique manufacturing process which is designed to overcome those challenges. And what it allows us to do is to make an essentially limitless number of these cells from a single blood donation. So we don't need to get new donors. And we also have a process that allows us to make these cells very consistently and while retaining their potency. So we believe this is a way that we can really mass produce these cells in a way that will retain their efficacy.
How does your one donor, one time approach change the game for developing large-scale therapies, as you've kind of touched on?
The one donor, one time part of it really is very important because, as I said, existing methods or pre-existing methods require this ongoing supply of new donors. They need new donors all the time. Now, that's a big logistical challenge, as you can imagine, if you have to have this endless supply of people willing to donate bone marrow, which is not a trivial thing to do. So there's a logistical challenge there, and of course, a cost associated with that as well. But an even bigger problem is there's lots of variability between donors, and that probably isn't a surprise. There's so much variability between humans in all sorts of ways. But so if you get lots of different people to donate bone marrow, you'll have MSCs with different levels of functionality and potency, and that means you've got an inconsistent product, which is really a huge challenge when you're trying to develop a medical therapy. So us moving away from that reliance on new donors really changes the game in terms of how these products can be made.
Now, you are about 8 to 12 months away from some really important clinical trial results. What are the trials testing and why are they so significant?
Yeah, look, it's a huge year ahead for Cynata. It really is. We, as you said, we have two different clinical trials with results expected within about sort of 8 to 12 months from now. One of those is what we call a phase 3 trial in osteoarthritis, and phase 3 is usually the last stage of trials required before you can get commercial approval for a product. So we have this trial in osteoarthritis where we have treated 320 patients with either our product or a placebo product, and they've been followed up for 2 years. And we'll have results from that trial around about February to April next year. What we're trying to show is that our product actually slows down or stops the degenerative process in the knee joint, which is what osteoarthritis is. The reason that would be huge if it's shown to be successful is right now there are no treatments that change the course of the disease. The existing treatments just help the symptoms. So they reduce pain or inflammation or whatever, but they don't stop the fact that your knee joint is continuing to deteriorate. So if we're successful with this, it could actually be the first time any treatment has been shown to have what we call a disease modifying effect in osteoarthritis. So that's the first one. Obviously, that's huge in its own right. The second one is a phase 2 trial, a global trial in US, Europe, and Australia in a condition called graft versus host disease, which I realize most people probably won't have heard of. It's a rare disease. It's a complication of bone marrow transplantation and similar procedures, which are used to treat cancers such as leukemia and lymphoma. It's a very, very nasty disease. Unfortunately, it's often fatal. And again, there are very limited treatment options for this condition, and existing treatment options tend to have a lot of toxicity. We had really encouraging phase 1 results, and we should have our phase 2 results probably about 9 months or thereabouts from now. So again, that's another one where we have an opportunity to potentially be the leading treatment for that condition. So for a small company like us, we don't necessarily have clinical trial results all of the time. So having two different trials reading out within such a short space of time is quite unique, but it means it genuinely will be an absolutely huge year ahead for us.
Now, from an investment standpoint, what does the runway to commercialization and first revenues look like for Cynata?
Yeah, so look, we're pursuing what we would call a partner-driven business model. So as many people might know, it does take a long time to actually get pharmaceutical-like products on the market. But our path to revenue could actually be quicker than that, because what we're looking to do, for example, if we think about the osteoarthritis trial that I just mentioned, we would be seeking a partner. So in other words, a licensing deal where perhaps a big pharma company takes the commercial rights to that product, and then they're the ones actually bringing it forward and selling it. And if that was to come to pass, we would expect to bring in revenue in quite the near term. So that would be, for example, an upfront licensing fee. And then down the track, we would be expecting to get royalties and so on product sales. So because of that model, it means that the time frame to revenue is actually not that far into the future for us, which I think makes sense for a smaller company like us to operate like that rather than to try and go the whole way ourselves, which requires a huge amount of capital, lots of time, and obviously a lot of know-how as well. Building up sales forces and so on is not necessarily a straightforward thing to do from scratch.
How many assets are in the pipeline among Cynata's portfolio?
Well, right now we have 4 different clinical assets. So I've mentioned 2 of those already. And then the other 2 are, we have a product for a condition called diabetic foot ulcer, which is a condition that affects people with chronic diabetes. They get wounds on their feet, which are very difficult to heal, and they cause lots of problems. They can lead to amputation even, so very serious problem. We completed a phase 1 clinical trial in that condition late last year with really encouraging results, and we're working on next steps for that right now. And then finally, we have a trial which is just in the early stages, which is happening in Europe at the moment in patients who receive a kidney transplant. And in that case, the aim is to use our product to help prevent the rejection of that transplanted kidney. So as I said, that's 4 clinical assets already active. We also have multiple preclinical assets as well, which we could take forward if we have the resources, which again, hopefully we will do with successful results next year.
What is the current state of the Cynata balance sheet and cash in terms of funding clinical trials and runway to commercialization?
Yeah, so we have runway right now to take us into the second half of next calendar year. So we had $5 million in cash at the end of June. We're still waiting on our R&D tax incentive rebate, which should come in the next couple of months. And those two things together will give us runway right through to the middle of next calendar year, which importantly is beyond those two clinical readouts. So we're in a pretty decent situation there. I should have mentioned as well, we're not actually funding the osteoarthritis trial. That's being funded by a grant. So our cash burn is actually probably much lower than people might expect for a company at our stage.
Do you have any ASX listed peers, and what are their market caps, and how is Cynata different?
Yeah, so look, the biggest, actually, the biggest company worldwide who are developing these MSC based therapies is actually also a company based in Melbourne, Mesoblast, MSB, who many investors may know of. They've been really successful. They've got a product recently on the market in the US, got FDA approval last year, which is fantastic, really, for everybody working in this sector. They have a market cap of $3 billion right now. Now, clearly, as I said, they have already got a product on the market in the US, so I'm not trying to say we're a direct comparison, but I think what that shows is that's the sort of potential that we have. And if we are successful in the coming years, there's no reason why we can't be heading towards that sort of market cap. And right now we're sitting here at less than $50 million. So I think the upside is pretty clear for everybody.
And finally, what can investors expect on a news flow front over the next 12 months?
The big news, of course, is those clinical trial readouts. But before we get there, first of all, we're still enrolling the last few patients in our graft versus host disease trial. So hopefully very soon we'll announce that has been finished, and that will set the timeline for results more clearly. We should also have an initial readout from the first cohort of patients in the kidney transplant trial before the end of this calendar year. And then moving into next calendar year, as I said, we'll have those two huge clinical trial results readouts. So there is a lot of news flow coming.
Kilian, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of From the Helm. If you enjoyed this episode diving into CYP, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all market commentary, insights, and of course, exclusive interviews just like this one.